Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here, and get ready for the Dossier series. Now, as the commander of the hostile alien resistance movement and resistance movement in general, Arm and Harm, for many years, which our activities have continued to a degree, we have been researching, following, and engaging certain extraterrestrial groups, both positive and negative. Of course, this is on a tiny little scale, and this is not some sort of Hollywood series, movie, etc., or a military engagement of any scale. And that's a whole nother story that we'll get into. And we will be producing many different series that we will offer, including the Dossier series. Now, this dossier is specifically being made to inform people about the tall white extraterrestrials and to be used when choosing a particular contact mech-tech amulet, which we will be producing. But to give people an idea, things aren't laid out well in a good fashion. Now, the information that we have on the tall whites comes from Charles James Hall, and this information is over 50 years old now. There isn't much new information on the tall whites and where they come from. There's a lot of things that we just plain and simple don't know. Or has not been given to the public, and we may not even know from the extraterrestrials, depending on what they're doing. But this is an idea of give you their temperament, how to approach them, etc. IGOS manufactures and offers different types of alien beacon technologies, meaning the fact that we're trying to draw them in. Part of them is the use of amulets, including a regular beacon that you use in general, that you put in your home to contact them. The contacting and the empowerment of positive extraterrestrials, we feel, is the cutting edge of metaphysics and the new reality. These beings, these extraterrestrials, are very advanced and have great abilities. That doesn't make them good people, that doesn't make them safe, that doesn't make them anything else, except they are very advanced. And the fact that they can make it to this planet physically means that they are very technologically advanced. Can these advances assist mankind? Well, of course they can. And pretty much most of the technology we see today, from integrated circuits to the anti-gravity that the military uses, all comes from reverse engineered or comes from the help of extraterrestrials. And that's where we've made our major jumps. Before that, scientific progress, as it is now, is extremely slow, tinkering, and results in very bad technology in general. And right now we've reached another stage where we're kind of stuck to go up to the next levels. But as a manifesting scientist, you're looking to empower yourself to the highest level you can in the shortest period of time that is safe. How do you do that? Now, there's always been a look at, from technologies of radionic and consciousness machines to different magical systems to brain empowerments. And all of these do work to some levels and still require a lot of research, because nobody is doing anything practical but IGOS. They're businesses, they're putting out products. They really don't care about the bigger truths and goals out there like IGOS does. So what is one way to jump that? And the way we jump that is by being empowered. Now, there's histories of people being empowered by extraterrestrials, which go to modern day. All the remote viewers, these military monkeys that claim that they do such great things, all had some sort of serious UFO sightings, contact, etc. Uri Geller claims to have been zapped by an alien, and from then on, he has great abilities. And the story goes on and on of people being contacted by extraterrestrials, and many of them being helped. The PK Man, the famous PK Man, claimed he was in contact with, and it was the extraterrestrials, these type of insectoids that were assisting him to do what he did. And this is just a short list, which is basically a very long list, and we have absolutely no idea how many people are being helped and are just quiet about it, which you should be, because all you get is ridicule. So people who have certain abilities, increased psychic powers, who are healers, shamans, etc., always seem to run into these entities, if nothing else, in the astral when they do magical practices. We're trying to keep a very strong wall between physical extraterrestrials, so-called blood and bone extraterrestrials. These are physical extraterrestrials that travel in physical crafts. They are like us in that way. They are, quote, humanoid, and most extraterrestrials, or if not all of them, have to have a particular physical makeup to do what they do. You got to have hands and feet if you're going to make tools. Tools make machines. So no matter how intelligent you are, if you don't have that, you'll never get past your basic subsistence. We can see this with animals that are very, very intelligent and far superior to us physically. I mean, we don't even come close, yet they don't have hands and feet that are movable so that we are able to dominate physically and mentally superior species because we're cunning and stand up and can grab things or make tools. So, we are things that are spiritual, things that are entities, spirits, gods, angels, etc., are not included in these dossiers or in this area of interest. They're completely different, and we have to look at these. What are they? Where do they come from? But we're talking about flesh and bone extraterrestrials, and they all stand up, have hands, have eyes, see, hear, etc. Whether these are slightly different and highly advanced is not the point. It's still basic. So, let's get back. So the information we have on the tall grays, which seem to be, may have morphed into the large tall grays, otherwise known more in that aspect, because there has been recent sightings of tall grays. The grays are always thought to be 3.5 to 4 feet, never any bigger than that. Well, that has changed where there's now a group of very tall grays. And oftentimes, these extraterrestrial groups are seen together in ships, with the reptoids, the so-called Nordics, and even the insectoids seem to have at times traveled together. I do find this kind of odd because I don't think people get along regardless of where they come from, but these are things that have been talked about. The major sightings, which are continuing today, where there's a lot of interaction because of abductions and hybrid breeding, are the grays. And this is another area. But I don't want to get too much, because this is a dossier on the tall whites. Now, who are they? They claim that they have an affection for Arcturus, the star out there. Now, this is one of the prominent stars in the sky. There are 3 stars that are very prominent, and one of them is Arcturus. And they claim a reverence for that. Now, this is a star, meaning it's a sun. They're not from there or living there, but they may have a planet close to that of where they come from. But this tells us something. The fact that the tall whites have refused to tell us where they come from. Now, what we're trying to do in this dossier is figure out their personality. If you're going to interact with them, if you're going to contact with them, and maybe in the extreme levels, make physical contact with them, meet them, being taken on ships, etc. I mean, all these things are possible. They're very unlikely, but do you want to get involved? What is their personality? Who are they? What are their intents? Well, that's what this dossier is all about. Now, they call them the tall whites because that's what they are. They are very tall and can reach the heights of 10 feet and above over their very long lifespan. They have a lifespan of 800 to 900 years, so it appears. Again, all the information we have is very general. Charles James Hall, who was basically a airman working at a base out in the middle of the Nevada desert, Nellis Air Force Base, was is where he came in contact with them, and this was their meeting point. And the military was trying to put people there to befriend these people, unsuccessfully, until Charles was able to befriend them, get to know them, and overcome his fear of dealing with such odd extraterrestrials. Now, what can we say about them? Well, they tend in their lifespan to get to these high heights. Generally, the average tall white is anywhere from 5'8" to 6'6", which would be very... But many of them are around 6 feet, and they do have women who tend to be smaller, and obviously children as well. So they seem to have a conventional family structure as we understand it from our little contact. Now, the intricacies of their actual social interactions are unknown. Charles Hall was not very smart. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He didn't seek this. He claimed he was too fearful of them, and that should be noted as well. But they seem to understand us, have that. So needless to say, if someone is 10 feet, it's going to be very obvious. Now, these are apparently kept somewhere, or maybe they're older or whatever. We just don't know. But there has been sightings of these coming out of crafts, of very older ones that are very tall. And of course, as I've said, there are now tall standard grays that have been noted as well, that are 7-8 feet. And they are standard type grays. Now, the tall whites are not standard type grays. They have a white complexion, white as a sheet of copy paper. That should be noted. They have large eyes, usually blue, but you're talking about double to triple the size of a human eye. So they're very noticeable. They're also very noticeable because they have this white face. They tend to have blonde and white hair. It is claimed that they are able to disguise themselves using makeup and human dress to easily infiltrate into society and walk next to you, that you would never know it. Now, there's a conflict there because they are extremely thin, but of course, we see kind of thin people. Could all these kind of freakish tall people or just fragile things? And we have people right now that seem to think that it's very attractive to walk around looking like a skeleton, not eating, thinking this is cool and sophisticated. They tend not to live long and have very fragile bodies. The tall grays do tend to have poor physical bodies, even though they seem to make it to 800. They heal very slowly. So if they're hurt, it takes them a long time to heal. Doesn't make much sense, but that's the reality. They also, in general, their health isn't that good, and have different diseases, but they are able apparently to cure their own diseases and live long. But it has been stated that these people, particularly since they're based in Nevada, oftentimes go into Las Vegas, which isn't too far away from where they live, and mix, including play gambling games. This may be a way of them getting money. They need money. Apparently, they go in groups. Generally, if you see one of them, there's at least 5 to 10 of them, which are serving as kind of bodyguards or in a group. This again makes sense because it's part of their personality and fear of the human race, which makes sense. So it's not like they call them the tall whites because they can get tall, but the point is that they're actually very similar in height as the average human, maybe a bit taller. So they're not a bunch of 7-foot people walking around that would be very noticeable, even though they can easily reach that height and much greater. Obviously, you're not going to mix in society if you're 7 or 8 feet. Everybody's going to look at you as tall people are looked at today. So unless they're going to play basketball, they're going to be freaks. And even people that are over 6'4" or even 6'4" have great trouble finding clothes, finding beds, fitting in chairs, fitting in airplanes, etc. if you want to mix. So the whole idea is they do tend to mix into that and do human things for whatever their research purposes are, to gather information. Maybe they're trying to gather currency that they want to use for something. We don't know. Obviously, if they mix and go in stores and casinos, they could also be going in other places to buy things. And you can't use your money in or on planet Earth makes sense. But they are working closely with the military and exchanging technological information. They refuse to say where exactly they come from, and they refuse to exchange military technology, but they're exchanging other types. Now, what does that mean? Well, it insinuates that they're exchanging drives, spaceship technology, etc., which, of course, what would these be used for? But they're not going to tell them how to make guns and weapons and exchange that information. So that tells us something about their personality. It tells them what they're doing. It makes sense. It makes sense for their own protection. It makes sense for the universe. They also seem to obey by intergalactic laws to a certain extent by not intermixing and exchanging deadly technologies with inferior societies. That is an intergalactic law. So they tend to follow that. So their family structure seems to be very similar to what is considered Earth-based. They also seem to have guards, a class of guards. They have repair people. They apparently have doctors. So they have these class. It's not that every man's a guard, every man's a doctor. So they seem to have a society structure that is typical to ours. Unfortunately, Hall never really got into any of this. He never had discussions with them about anything whatsoever. He just observed. There were guards. There were people that constantly were watching and carrying types of weapons. He noticed that they had a family structure. There are females. There are children. So there seems to be different sexes that way. Or so we can tell. We're not really sure because he didn't define their sexuality or how they reproduced. So we just don't know, but we're taking the graphic information we got from him. There were many children spotted, and these children were playing and were active in the area, which is interesting as well. Now, let's get down to their personalities as well. We're going to go into their abilities, and possibly can these abilities be transferred to somebody else, or can you be empowered? We're going to talk about all this, and these are kind of long discussions, so hang in there. It's pretty fascinating, especially if you're trying to figure out if this is someone you want to contact. And how would you do that? And everything else. Well, all that is to come with your amulets and others when they're ordered, so you have that information. But we will talk a little bit about all of it. So what is their personalities? So apparently they've been visiting Earth for hundreds, probably thousands of years. They talk about this. They talk about meeting primitive pioneers who went through different areas, and them, of course, being totally scared. Now, their appearance is not just tall and white, as we've just discussed. And we're talking white. We're not talking, well, that's a white dude. Well, we're not talking about Caucasian whites. We're talking as white as a sheet of paper. They wear protective suits. And for one reason or another, they seem to be photonic based, or maybe even fiber optic based, like their ships seem to be made out of. So when they use these suits, which protect them from everything, including any kind of physical attack, they glow. It's like turning on a giant fluorescent light, particularly in the middle of a desert. Can you imagine what that would look like? So they look like a classic ghost that we see in the movie. A white glowing ball. Now, I don't know if ghosts really look like that, but ghosts tend to be emitting light, white light, and that's why people see them in the dark. Now, that only may be a certain class of ghosts, and other ones we don't see at all because they don't do that. But this makes them very obvious. But these are suits they wear to protect themselves and give them great abilities. Per the person Hall, it was the suit that gave them all the abilities, and that they made them into the suit. The suit was able to create telepathic functionings, or at least he thinks that. We don't know how much these actually worked. Again, he wasn't too inquisitive. He got some raw information. These suits also protected their body in general because they are fairly fragile. It also allowed them to run at speeds of 30 to 50 miles an hour. So they could move that fast. They also floated. Again, they floated doing most things, which makes sense. Would you run somewhere? Well, that's a physical thing, and if you're fragile, it doesn't make sense. So they would float at rapid speeds again. So they would move along the ground floating, even though apparently they also walked on the ground as well, and footprints were found. But in general, they like to float places, move quickly. As I said, so if you're going to move at 40, 50 miles an hour, this is again a ghost-like, fast moving, which is quite frightening. So it means they can be on top of you within seconds, they can move quickly away from you, etc., etc. But they have the ability to float and move very quickly. They have the ability to send thoughts and to psychically sense you. It is also thought that they have very acute hearing, much similar to a dog, and we have to assume that they have the same kind of sense of smell. So all their senses are extremely advanced and, 10 times to 100 times more acute than humans. They do tend to have large eyes, which means they probably see well. Now, not much is talked about this either. The suits prevent them from being hurt. In one instance with Charles Hall, he was instructed to throw rocks at them, and the rocks would just kind of go up in the air a foot or two, and then they would just fall down. This is common in terms of contact with extraterrestrials, where they're able to control particularly guns. If you shoot a gun at extraterrestrials, generally it's been noted that the bullets just kind of fall down on the ground. So it doesn't hurt them. Machine guns don't hurt them. They have stated this to Hall, that regular guns do nothing to them. So that it's a waste of time to try and shoot them. And they are well protected because of these glowing white suits. Now, what does that mean if they're in public? If they're in a casino, they've got clothes on. Do they have their suits underneath to protect them? Maybe not. Maybe that's why they have so many guards. Is it the suit entirely that is doing this? Unknown. That's what Charles states. It seems to be connected. Everything seems to be connected to the suit, which of course makes sense. Many grays, and people think they have these big giant eyes. Well, that's a suit helmet in many instances. Grays don't look like grays. That's the suit you're seeing. So these are the things again. Now, he did not apparently see what they looked like. He didn't mention any sexual features, sexual organs, etc., even though artists have made these species look really sexy. I don't know. I'm not sure what Halls, who seems to be a social strange person, didn't fit in very well, didn't seem to have too many contacts in that area, was a good judge of anything. I don't know. It's hard to say from looking at his movie and from his poor writings that are kind of storybook. So they claim that they are basically then unable to be hurt by any known conventional weapons of the 1965 era. Now, is that still true? And could they deal with a laser beam or other type weapons that we have now that are more advanced? It's unknown, of course. But these are the abilities that they have. Their abilities are the fact to be able to float, move quickly, read minds, and read minds at a great distance. They've talked about reading minds at 20, 30 miles away, knowing what you're going to do, sending messages into you to hear what they're saying, so to speak. And I'm assuming, and of course you got to remember this guy is a guy who has Bible quotes in every chapter. So he's not thinking as a manifesting occult scientist. He's thinking as an average Joe. To think that they can't implant thoughts into him is absurd, or that he couldn't be psychically controlled, even though it doesn't seem to be that's the way they reacted. When they were threatened or even appeared to be threatened, they would easily murder someone or kill them. Using weapons that were the size stated by him on numerous occasions, they carried things the size of pencils that appeared to be like a laser gun or movie land type ray gun, so to speak. So they would fry you with this, and this actually happened to a person he knew. He surprised these. They took it as a threat, and they zapped and gave him third-degree burns. And he was not armed. He was just working in the area. They knew of him, but they are very skittish and they are very fearful. Now, we don't know why. Did they run into problems where humans killed them? Or were they just being safe? Because humans are pretty crazy. If I went anywhere in the world, if I could, I would constantly have a gun on me with lots of bullets. Humans are scum. Why would you trust any of them? And the fact that people want to carry guns and we have such huge militaries and police and everything else should tell you a bit about the human race in general to each other. So, I mean, being skittish is not a good idea. Being careful, having guards and other things, well, it just seems to me to make sense, unless you're a stooge. So, but they zapped this guy pretty bad in the face, no less. Now, it didn't kill him. It did supposedly leave some scars, and scarred for life, being zapped by an extraterrestrial. But this was, from what is known, this was an overreaction to someone that was working in the area who was known, but they just got a little bit scared, and they reacted with deadly force. And this seems to be the case. Everyone that came in contact with them, and there were many people who worked at this particular military post, were all afraid, and they all had the same thing. You know, these guys are really armed. They heard it from the other guy, and there does seem to be guards that carried larger rifle-like weapons, so it appears. But all of them carried these pen-sized laser beam guns that could easily kill you. A matter of fact, Hall was almost himself killed, even though Hall stated they loved and trusted him. But because at one particular occasion they were a little bit fearful, because he got a little bit too close, they almost killed him. As a matter of fact, he barely survived in a kind of very uncredible story, if that part of his story is wrong. We also believe that Hall made up things to make nice stories. Also, there is no further discussions of tall whites. If there was so many of them, they had underground bases, you think there would be more discussions and sightings. There's very little in this area. But when we really get down to it, there's very little discussions about extraterrestrials in general, and especially any long-term contact. Hall had long-term contact of almost 2 years. But they're very, very skittish, and they will go to deadly force at a drop of the hat, even if they kind of know you and you do not do even any overtly threatening things. But overtly threatening to them could be just moving quickly, even if you're at a distance. They will kill you. They are extremely fearful. Their so-called like, and even him stating they loved him, bizarre tales that he stated, doesn't come out in the real world. They trusted him with children and other things, where he was close to children and so forth, and he even supposedly saved one of their children who was kind of lost in the desert. He saved one of their guards who fell down sick, and even with all that, they attacked him and didn't really trust him, even though it says in the book they finally trust him and it was really good. There are some conflicting things here, but I don't know if they're conflicting. It shows you the nature of this particular group. They're very, very frightened. They're extremely protective of their own, and they will react with deadly force anytime they feel like it without giving it a question. So, you are nothing to them, even if they know you. They are in a hostile world. They are very, very fearful. This is not their planet. They are visitors. They come here. They do whatever they want. Apparently, they mix quite freely with the general staff and have exchanged lots of technical information. They have lots of contact with military officers of that level. They don't seem to have contact with anybody else and not really have established any kind of friendships or exchanged any kind of very personal information. Very much bits and pieces. Their capacity to move very quickly, to their ships and everything else. Now, they're glowing most of the time, which makes them very obvious in most areas. But apparently that can be turned off or not used. They turn their equipment off. This has been talked about, that they have certain electronics to create things, and these can be turned off. Now, to what level, what's going on, the types, but we know they have armaments. They have armaments on their ships, which they can easily blow things up and kill people, places, and things. They also carry individual weapons. We could call these handgun type things. They are described as pencil type objects, meaning they're very small, very thin, but very deadly. There's also been noted guards carrying things that appear to be rifle-like and large, and there are many of them. They do have classes, apparently, of scientists, classes of repair people, warriors, etc. This is to keep in mind. So their structure, or their family structure and society structure, appears to be similar to ours, but of course that just makes sense. You have to have people that do these things. Everybody wouldn't do everything. But what are we to keep? Now, we want to recap here that, approaching these, if you were ever to see one of these crafts or these beings, approaching them physically would be highly dangerous and not recommended. They don't want you close. They will kill you. Plain and simple. Any approaching of them, and logically so, being in hostile territory far away from home, they will react fast, quickly, and deadly. So these are not species you approach, and you certainly don't move in on them. Any movement towards anything is considered a threat. Doesn't matter how far you were away, doesn't matter if you're moving slowly with your hands up, saying, "Hey dude, I got some weed, you wanna taste some of the weed?" They will fry you and probably take the weed. Well, the whole idea is that that's not smart. They are very jumpy, and they are well aware. They must have run into other hostiles on other planets, and they are well armed, knowing that they have to kill other species, and maybe they even had wars among themselves, that they have developed deadly weapons, and certainly have no love or like for Earth beings. So they are very standoffish. They're very neutral. They are not what you would call a hostile. A hostile kills you. They hunt you. They're tracking you. They will hunt you down and kill you. They will enter your home unwelcome. This is what the Greys do, and these are the kind of hostiles that ARM tangled with in different abduction cases. These Greys were not really armed. They did everything mentally. They weren't pulling guns or they had these deadly weapons, the ones that I dealt with many years ago. These do. And they don't do these practices that are negative. So you're not going to, if you're out somewhere and you see them, they're not going to come over and zap and kill you. If you go to approach them, if you make any kind of aggressive moves for them, even if they're not have a hostile intent, well, I'm just trying to check you out, man. Well, check out somebody else. You'll be dead. So, now, let's get into their capacities and so forth. So, if you were ever to meet these or come upon them, it is highly recommended you keep a large distance, that you sit down, that you put a non-threatening attitude in your mind, and you telepathically communicate with them from a distance. Remember, telepathy is not something, I have to stand next to this guy to get him the message. No. People have sent telepathic messages down to the bottom of the seas into submarines. They have done it 6,000 miles away to people sitting in bank vaults, and people have gotten the messages as if they were written down and handed to them. This is the nature of psychic energy and these subatomic informational energetic fields, which are not in any way unable to deliver their messages wherever they are. They could be 50 light years away, and instantaneous transfer of information will take place. So you don't need to be right on somebody. That's a human understanding using human value. Well, you can't talk to somebody half a mile away, not unless you're using a communication device. So, well, I got to get up. I want to talk to them. I got to be within, 2 feet of them? 3 feet? 5 feet? Well, that's a human understanding. When it comes to psychic power, you don't even have to be on the same planet. This is how our beckoning devices work, and they hear you. Do they want to obey you? And do they obey you? Are you going to tell an advanced species, hey, buddy, come to my house. I got good chicken? Well, it doesn't work like that. They decide with a whole number of reasons. Yet psychic communication, which people will probably disregard as not having, I want to see them, I want to handshake them, I want to eat a Martian taco. Well, the point is it doesn't work like that. You have to be a credible person using credible technologies and know that you are dealing in at very advanced communication levels where you're going to get psychic messages. If you are centered, if you follow IGOS technologies and procedures, and you have opened up your psychic center by using training tools, you will get the proper messages you need and be guided. And you have to state that that information is potent and powerful, and you will see it as it manifests in your life. Very, very important. So, we've got to understand that these are not hunters, but they will react to any sign of aggression, and any aggression means approaching them, friendly or not, is aggression, and you will most likely be killed if you physically approach them. Now, their abilities. Now, first of all, as we've mentioned already, their abilities to move very fast. He claimed that they could run at 30 to 40 miles an hour. Well, I don't know if they're running at that time or just moving, but they're able to glide, move. They were able to lift off the ground, move through windows, and there is talk that they were able to go through solid structures. They entered buildings through the walls. Now, this is very typical and something that I have witnessed myself and seems to be something within the advanced extraterrestrials. They don't go to open windows. They don't have locks to get in. They just go through the walls, because that's the nature of them. They are going through, they are dematerializing their bodies for a certain period of time. So they're able to float to things, but they do float all the time. The children were floating up and down constantly, that Charles Hall observed, going in and out the windows of his truck, playing. They were seen to play in this fashion, going up and down and floating around many places, as were the actual Greys, who went in and out of buildings and so forth. Well, they were able to float. They were able to move very quickly, either running or floating. So they had these capacities. They were able to implant information into your mind, and they were able to read your mind. And this has been verified of at least 30 miles away from some of the information that Hall gives. So they knew where he was. They knew what he was thinking. All of those things, which of course gets complicated. Well, why would you attack someone if you know they're really not there to hurt you? Well, they are very emotional entities. They get mad very easy. They have strong survival skills. They are reactive to their children, their women, and themselves, and will act quickly without seeming to use these advanced abilities. Now, they also were noted by Hall of having the abilities, which is more intriguing and very much more down to earth, which is what I'm always seeking, the ability to know the cards in a deck, and that he actually played poker or played at a table with one of these tall white females. And she knew every card in the deck without it being showed. She could look at the deck and know where each individual card was in there using their psychic ability. Well, this is very interesting. Now we're getting into some practical skills that humans can use. And was this generated through their basic abilities? Was this an electronic process? Because we hear this a lot, but do they have non-glowing uniforms that produce this? Is there an electronic technology they're wearing on their beings that produce these high states of psychic abilities? We don't know. And of course, old Charles was not really very interested in any of this. There weren't really any different conversations going on where he probed too many things. But they seem to have this psychic capacity. They probably have telekinesis abilities as well, moving items, doing things, etc. Now, this wasn't too verified in any of the books of his 5 books. I couldn't find telekinesis per se. But we've got to understand they most likely have that as well. They certainly can psychically read you, they can psychically influence you, and they know or were able to perceive, could they look through a card? How would they know what the cards look? But they had the ability to, of a stack of cards, they would know what each card was. Interesting. Could these abilities also be used on other games of chance? Roulette, slot machines. Could they make a slot machine win? Well, there's no talk of this. They didn't go up to slot machines and make them win. This could be kind of obnoxious. Ding, 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 ding. The tall white woman wins again. How come she's won so much money? Maybe you didn't want to do that. So, certainly it would be less direct, but could be more direct because they're such obnoxious and meant to be. So playing cards, but she readily admitted this to the dealer and told the dealer what the cards were. Now, again, all of this stuff gets hazy, blurry, and stinky when you look at it too long. So he was just intrigued by that, saying, what great luck you. It's not luck when you're naming 4 cards, and these dealers are told that, people that does this kind of stuff, get rid of them. Don't play with them. But that was not the case from him at all. He just chuckled at it, which is kind of going against what he said in previous books where the dealers were crooks who cheated people. This dealer apparently thought that it was perfectly unique and fun. Well, not sure what to make there, but we don't want to get into too many details here. We're trying to figure out what the abilities. So they have psychic abilities, strong ones that we assume could be used in any way. If they can read cards, they probably can move roulette wheels. Maybe they can make the slot machines trigger. All this stuff, as I've just mentioned, certainly is possible. Even if it's just a card game, if you know what the cards are, you're going to win. Simple as that. So that is certainly a way to use it, and I guess we can extrapolate on that basic ability that you could use it for many things. But certainly here's a way to raise a lot of money by knowing what the cards are and you win. If all the cards were dealt face up and everybody knew what the cards were, well, there would be no game. So we actually have that, which is quite fascinating. So we all need to fully understand that in terms of their capacities. Now, we don't know anything else, but obviously these are superhuman abilities. They seem to be traced to technology in this book, or at least that's Charles Hall's interpretation. The suits made them move quickly. The suits protected them. So we do have to understand that they also have some sort of electronic capacities of protection, meaning now this is unlikely that you could gain this kind. It's unlikely you're going to be given technology, be able to use it, and walk around with it. So this is the kind of exchange of technology that's rarely done, probably for lots of reasons. So to think that you're going to get a suit and you're going to get some sort of technology, well, it's possible. But most likely, if someone gave you plans, you couldn't build it. How can you build something that's 1,000 years ahead of you? You're not going to understand any of the components. We were given some technologies, and we're given very primitive designs of kind of how they energetically worked. We couldn't figure out anything past that. So the whole idea is that we need to fully understand the reality of that. Now, anything is possible, but it doesn't seem like these species in particular are interested in working too closely with you. They are very standoffish while they are not hostile in terms of hunting you and destroying and using and robbing, raping, all the things that a lot of extraterrestrials do. They don't do that. They also are not too concerned with assisting you, so it appears. So they're not going to be too anxious to give or assist you with anything, so it appears. Now, this is the problem with all extraterrestrials. Very few want to assist. And could they assist? Could they open up psychic channels in you, empower you? Well, these are common cases that have been noted by hundreds of people. But they don't apparently seem to be doing this. Does this group seem to care? Well, not really. They seem to be, and we're not sure why they're traveling. They seem to bring in new people. They go back and forth to their planet. Apparently, they go to many other planets where they have bases on as well. but they're not really interesting in mixing, at least with human or earth beings. As I've mentioned yet again, they are not here to hunt or kill us, but they're not here as our buddies. So what can be gotten from this? Can you access that? Well, one of the things about accessing streams of empowerment is that it is possible to access the knowledge and empowerment stream of any race in the universe. Animals, people who have died, well, they have energetic empowerments that you can access, and the stronger our technology gets, the stronger we'll be able to make connections to this. So there is the direct help, which is always extremely difficult to get. There is the next level to that. Well, they're being empowered through a certain energetic consciousness stream. These can be tapped into by anyone who knows the technology of how to do it. Now, how strong can you tap it? How can it come in? Again, it's not just click, click, click. You're now a super being. But you can draw in energy in terms of greater and vast knowledge that allows you to function at a higher level, and you can also take your regular pathetic energetic field and dramatically improve it so that you're able to start performing at a much higher and possibly even what's considered, quote, supernatural levels, by tapping into the energies of these. So you're kind of mimicking someone else. You're connecting to their energies to get their information, their intelligence. And this is not just intelligence in I add numbers together fast, me special. No, this is about intelligence of having to access your ultimate empowerments within your consciousness, meaning they are accessing higher levels of their being. And if you can get a tiny percentage of information on how to do that for yourself personally, well, you have beaten the world. That's what we are seeking, and that's what's behind that. And of course, that's what any one of our amulets do, and particularly when we're trying to connect to any person or extraterrestrial. We're trying to connect to their energy fields and bring that in. It makes a lot of sense. The problem is it's difficult to bring that and make that physical within your life, and you have to look at the little things happening, not at the big, gross things happening. Because it's the little changes that you then implement in your life that turn into big empowerments. So nothing is easy. Nobody can be made a superstar. You can't put information into somebody's head and make them an expert. This doesn't even seem to be possible, the kind of matrix thing. I know Kung Fu. You can't do that. And you never probably will. It's too complicated. It's not just a intellectual understanding of a martial art. It's the physical nerve synopsis that everything happens so that you can do Kung Fu. It's not remembering it, it's doing it in a particular physical, mental, and spiritual way. And that can't be done by implanting in you. But we must seek higher empowerments. We do know that extraterrestrials are real. There are many, many of them, probably at least 100 that come to this planet all the time. And they have all different abilities. And of course, the technology we have today in this world is based on a lot of their technology. Not that we figured it out. So, and that means we're able to take their information and make it into a human usable form. We can do this on the psychic realm as well. What are their psychic systems? What do their suits trigger? How are their suits triggering fantastic telepathic and telekinesis abilities? We don't need to have physical tools and spaceships. We're looking for the biophysical empowerment. Now, they're doing this right now. Now, I'm sure that the military is investigating what I've just talked about. They are doing this with DNA now, where they're taking super psychic people and transferring that DNA into others to make them super psychic. They're also using drugs to trigger things in the brains to stimulate the psychic centers. This is happening and happening now on a crude way. IGOS is into the much more advanced informational energetic fields that create all matter, and they create all the psychic matter. And if they're tuned properly, could make you into a super being. Now, we have super beings as well already out there, many different extraterrestrials. What can we learn from them? Not, I don't want your computers, I don't want your fancy boots, I don't want your ships, I don't necessarily want to go to another planet and see you and be out of my own structure. I just want to function here at a higher level. It's the Superman syndrome. What I want is to be able to have super abilities on this planet, not elsewhere. So stay tuned for our other dossiers to come up on other extraterrestrials so you can learn what they're good for and how you can access this as we get further into the development of mech tech. Until next time.